Welcome back to the Macbeth Explained Annotate With Me series. In today's video, we'll be looking at Act 5, Scene 2. As you can see, it's a very short scene, and in fact, many of the scenes of Act 5 are quite short. Act 5 is very heavy in terms of action, because so far in the play, we know that Malcolm has been gathering an army, and his army is coming back to Scotland, but Act 5 really kind of covers the sort of war, the battle between Macbeth and Malcolm, and leads us to the climax of the story, and of course the ending, the conclusion, the resolution. And so many of the scenes that we're going to be looking at from here on out are quite short. This is not a scene that's likely to come up in the exam. It features, if you look at it, it features characters that are very secondary, characters that are usually here to move on the plot. We've got Menteith, Caithness, characters that we barely see in the text. Angus, Lennox, we see them a little bit more. But like I said, they are usually there to kind of give the audience context, give the audience information or exposition about what's happening in the story. And so in this scene, we are still going to look at key quotations that give us information about Macbeth, how he's being treated, how he's being seen, quotations that you could potentially use for an essay about Macbeth. But like I said, this is not likely to be a sort of key theme. So long as you know what this theme is about, it's not really a scene that you would need to revise. So like I said, I'll just be focusing on sort of important quotations that you could use in an essay for a specific theme or the character of Macbeth. I'm going to begin without further ado. So if you'd like to pause, go grab your copies of the text, pens, highlighters, anything that you might need, and press play when you're ready. So scene 2, the country near Dunsinane. So we are sort of to the side, in the countryside, near the castle, near the royal castle where Macbeth would be. Drum and colours. Colours here means like banners. So different lords would all have different banners with their own house colours or the colours that would represent their family or their name. And to the audience, drum and colours, drum and the sight of banners, would tell the audience that war has come, that the armies have come. Because so far as the audience, we know, of course, that Malcolm is on his way, that he's gathered an army, but now the audience is being told visually through the props and through what's on the stage, and through the, of course, the sounds of the drums, now we know that war has come. Enter Menteith, Caithness, Angus, Lennox, and soldiers. And of course, these are all Scottish thanes or lords. Menteith says, the English power is near, led on by Malcolm, his uncle Seward, and the good Macduff. So Malcolm, his uncle, and Macduff have arrived leading the army. Revenge is burning them, for their dear causes would to the bleeding and the grim alarm excite the mortified man. So he's saying here that the cause, the reason why Malcolm and Macduff and Seward are fighting is so noble. It's such a good cause. Like, they are doing the morally correct thing, that even dead people would rise up to fight for them. And here what they're basically saying is that Malcolm is on the right side of this war. He's the one fighting for the right reason. And even dead people would sort of support his cause, heavily insinuating or suggesting that many people in Scotland support Malcolm's cause as well. So we know here that basically not a lot of people would be supporting Macbeth in this war. Angus says, near Burnham Wood shall we meet them. So we find out that Malcolm's army at the moment is headed or is staying near Burnham Wood. And of course, Burnham Wood is a location we've already heard about back in Act 4, when Macbeth returns to the witches, and the witches give him a prophecy telling him he will not be vanquished or defeated until Burnham Wood comes to Dunsinane Castle. So even though we don't really know what's happening in Burnham Wood at the moment, we just know that the lords are going to be meeting Malcolm's armies there. As the audience, we know that this is a significant place, and this gives us a hint that things are not going to go as well as the witches told Macbeth they would. We also find out, of course, that the lords are turning their back on Macbeth officially, and they're leaving Macbeth's side, leaving Dunsinane to go fight for Malcolm. That's why they're meeting him there. That way are they coming. Caithness says, who knows if Donald Bane be with his brother? So has Donald Bane sort of returned from, if you remember, Ireland? For certain, sir, he is not. I have a file of all the gentry. There is Seward's son, and many unrough youths that even now protest their first of manhood. So Lennox says, no, Donald Bane's not fighting alongside his brother, but we know that Seward is there, Seward's son is there, and a lot of youths, so a lot of young men who are sort of trying to, well, who are sort of entering manhood by joining this fight. Menteith says, what does the tyrant? And here, when they refer to the tyrant, of course, they're referring to Macbeth. And you'll have noticed by now, if you've been watching the videos, that in many of these scenes where the characters are discussing Macbeth, when he's not there, they don't refer to him by his name anymore. And they don't refer to him by all these beautiful positive adjectives that they used to refer to him at the beginning, these brave Macbeth, valiant Macbeth, all of that. They now only refer to him as the tyrant. So there's a sort of dehumanization of Macbeth, as though, well, we know that his reputation is in ruins now, but it's almost as if they kind of have separated who Macbeth has become now to who Macbeth used to be. They don't even refer to him as Macbeth. It's like he's become this new entity, this new person, this tyrant, and that's how they refer to him. So really interesting use of language here from Shakespeare to show Macbeth's sort of fallen status in the eyes of the others, how he's changed so completely that he's barely himself anymore. Caithness says, Great Dunsinane he strongly fortifies. So here we find out that Macbeth hasn't been wasting his time. He has actually been fortifying Great Dunsinane. So he's making sure it can withhold an attack. Some say he's mad. So that's really interesting because this rumor that Caithness sort of mentions is, of course, only confirming what we already know from having seen him go back to the witches, from having seen his behavior and some of the things that he has said, something that he himself foreshadows much earlier on in the text when he tells his wife that his mind feels as if it's full of scorpions. So this madness of Macbeth, we as an audience have very much seen sort of escalate as the text has gone on, and now we know that other people know about it as well. Others that lesser hate him do call it valiant fury, but for certain he cannot buckle his distempered cause within the belt of rule. So again, we've got the idea of cause here. Malcolm is gathering his army and things are going great for him because he's doing the right thing. But because Macbeth has been such a terrible ruler, because he's lost the love and loyalty of his people, he's actually struggling to maintain control over his government, over his people, his armies. And as a result, he's sort of struggling to organize himself in this war. Angus says, and this is probably the most key part of this scene. If you're going to sort of revise anything from this scene, I will just revise this part. Angus himself is insignificant, but what he says about Macbeth is very interesting. He says, now does he feel his secret murders sticking on his hands. So we have a great metaphor here of Macbeth's murders sticking to his hands. What Angus is actually saying is that the reason why Macbeth is struggling so much to maintain control and to be a good king in Scotland is because he's now feeling the sort of consequences of his murders, his secret murders. But of course, this metaphor, this idea of the murder sticking to his hands, is an idea that has become a motif in Macbeth. It's an idea that we've heard several times. We know that Macbeth, as soon as he kills Duncan, refers to the idea of never being able to wash the blood clean from his hands. We know that Lady Macbeth, just in the previous scene, was talking about, will these hands ever be clean? And she herself feels that blood on her hands. And so it's almost like a conclusion here to this theme, this motif of the blood on Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's hands, and how that blood is sticking, is there. It can't go away, can't be washed away. So far in the text, that blood has represented guilt, but here that blood also represents shame, Macbeth's shameful actions, and also the consequences that have come with what Macbeth has done. People know about it now, and as a result, he's struggling to rule his kingdom. Angus says, now minutely revolts upbraid his faith breach. So people are sort of fighting back against him, rebelling against him. Those he commands move only in command, nothing in love. And here he's basically explaining how Macbeth's soldiers at the moment are actually only fighting for him because they have to. Yeah, they move only in command. They move because he's telling them to, and he's their king and they have to obey. They don't have a choice. But not out of love, not out of loyalty. And this is a great contrast to the start of the play, where Macbeth himself is a soldier and he is fighting very successfully for his country out of love and loyalty. And he even tells Duncan, you know, the service I do pays for itself. Like he's defending his country out of love for what he's doing. And so this complete contrast between how Macbeth used to fight for Duncan and how his soldiers are fighting for him without any love or loyalty is such a great way that Shakespeare shows us Macbeth's fall from grace, his downfall, his complete reversal of fortune. Things have gone completely the opposite of how they used to be for him. Things have gone from being, you know, he's gone from being a loyal, loving subject to now being this hateful king. So if you're doing an essay about Macbeth as a tragic character, Macbeth's downfall, Macbeth's character arc, great quote here. Then Angus says, now does he feel his title, so his title of king, hang loose about him like a giant's robe upon a dwarfish thief. So again, we've got really good simile here, and this time this links really well to the theme of kingship, the idea of the divine right of kings. Angus is basically saying that the title of king is like a giant's robe, a giant's clothes. And Macbeth is like a dwarfish thief, like a tiny small thief. And he's wearing these robes that are, of course, far too big for him, as a way of saying Angus is basically saying that Macbeth doesn't fit the title of king. The title of king fits really loosely around him. He can't wear it well. And if you think about someone really short wearing giant massive clothes, they'd be tripping over it. They wouldn't be able to get anything done. There's an implication of sort of awkwardness, of clumsiness. And that's how he's describing Macbeth. And this links really well to the theme of kingship, because this is a really good simile to show us how Macbeth isn't fit for kingship. And that links us back to, of course, the divine right of kings. The reason why Macbeth doesn't fit the title of king is because he's not meant to be king. He's not been chosen by God. And that's why he's not a good king. And this, of course, reinforces Shakespeare's message in Macbeth, which is, kings are chosen by God. You can't make yourself king. It's not enough to use force. It's not enough to bully people. That will not make you king. Having a crown will not really make you king if God hasn't chosen you. Menteith says, who then shall blame his pestered senses to recoil and start, when all that is within him does condemn itself for being here? Menteith is making a great point, and he's saying sort of, no wonder Macbeth is struggling so much, when he's implying that Macbeth is probably struggling inwardly. Like he probably is struggling because of everything he's done. He's saying it's almost like your brain and your mind will rebel against the horrible things that it's done. And he's saying Macbeth, having done all these horrible things, is probably like struggling, mentally speaking, like he must have this inner debate going on all the time. So no wonder he's messing up now. Caithness says, well, march we on. Well, we're going anyway to join Malcolm's army, to give obedience where 'tis truly owed, to obey the person that we should truly obey. Another link to the divine right of kings. The Thanes don't feel at this point as if they are betraying Macbeth in any way, because they know who they owe their loyalty to, who they owe their obedience to, and it's not Macbeth, it's Malcolm, the rightful heir of Duncan, whom Duncan himself named, and who, of course, would have been chosen by God. Meet we the medicine of the sickly wheel. He's saying, let's go meet the medicine of the sick land. And of course, the medicine here is a metaphor for Malcolm. Malcolm is going to cure or heal or mend the sick land, the broken land. And with him pour we in our country's purge, each drop of us. And all of them are basically going to help Malcolm heal the country, fix the country. Lennox says, or so much as it needs to do the sovereign flower and drown the weeds. He's basically kind of comparing Macbeth to like weed that's sort of overtaken the sovereign flower. So Malcolm would be like the flower that should be king, and Macbeth is like the weeds that have grown around it, and they're going to sort of rip out those weeds and get rid of the sort of rubbish that is Macbeth. Make we our march towards Burnham. And here this is Shakespeare building up to the climax. We know there's something significant about Burnham Wood because of the witch's prophecy. We just don't know what's going to happen yet. But what we know is that all these lords are now sort of leaving Macbeth's side and joining Malcolm in his fight. Exeunt marching. So they march off with all their soldiers to go join Malcolm's army. And this is where we'll stop for today. It's a nice short scene, but like I said, this section here, Angus's little bit about Macbeth, is really, really good. It links to a lot of the key themes of the text, and it's there's lots of useful quotes there, especially if you're writing about Macbeth. So I hope that this was helpful. Join me next time. I'll be doing Act 5, Scene 3. We're almost done now. If you do have questions, or if you do have specific requests for videos you'd like to see after I'm done going through the main text, so I will be going through some key quotations, but if you'd like specific advice based on a specific theme, a specific character, please feel free to make requests or give some ideas in the comments. We read all the comments, and of course, if there is something that you would find useful, let us know. We will definitely consider it when we make future videos. As usual, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you all in the next one.